For the last 3 budgets, we've seen 2 windfall gains completely wasted, and now we've got deficits as far as the eye can see. The Coalition will be looking for a budget that can restore the lost standard of living that has been lost under this government. People have gone backwards by 8%. Our standard of living has collapsed further and faster than ever before. So we'll be looking for a budget that restores our lost standard of living. So a budget that restores our prosperity and opportunity for all Australians. And most importantly, a budget that restores the fiscal guardrails, the disciplines, the honesty that has served Australians well in budgets past. Jim Chalmers has delivered 3 failed budgets in the past. Windfall gains now turned to red ink and budget deficits as far as the eye can see. Australians deserve better. That's why Peter Dutton and the Dutton Coalition-led opposition, hopefully soon government, has a plan to restore your prosperity. We have a plan to bring our standard of living back up to where it was. We have a plan to get cost of living under control by tackling inflation head-on sustainably, to reduce energy prices, to deliver affordable homes, to deliver quality healthcare, and to keep Australians safe by delivering safer communities. I'm happy to take questions.
The tax to GDP ratio is reportedly going to be 23.1% below the cap that you're setting. So is that a good sign that the government finally inside the guardrails that you talk about?
And yet Australians are being taxed more than ever before under this government. They're paying an additional $3,500 a year in tax. The average taxpayer is paying more. Well, we don't think that that's good enough. We think that Australians deserve to have a budget that is run with the disciplines to make sure that a tax to GDP ratio is not something you reach by luck, it's something that you reach by discipline. It's a spending discipline. It makes sure that you work within an envelope that's sustainable so that we can get ourselves back to a structural, balanced budget in the medium term.
You talk about the extra tax that we're paying. Does that mean Peter Dutton's big announcement on Thursday night might be tax cuts?
You'll have to tune in to Thursday night.
The gas, the independents are today calling for a gas reserve policy to keep more Australian gas onshore. Is that something the coalition would support?
We've certainly said that we will immediately, on coming to government, fast-track approvals for gas because it's the only way to bring prices down sustainably. Now, we can have subsidies and we're not going to stand in the way of Labor's subsidy. But the problem is it's a subsidy because of their failed policy. What we need to see is energy prices come down sustainably. Electricity prices had gone up by underlying around 32%, gas prices by around 34%. So we'll inject more gas into the system immediately to bring down the underlying prices of gas, underlying prices of energy. And I should say, this is not a promise. This is not a promise made 97 times prior to the last election to bring down energy prices by $275. This is a commitment to sustainably bring down the cost of energy in this system. It starts with the gas, and then in the longer term, it moves to zero emissions nuclear power as those coal-fired power stations retire.
As part of those increased approvals, though, will there be a protectionist reserve policy in the face of what is global rising protectionism across the world?
Well, we'll announce our policies as the election campaign kicks off, whenever it may kick off. You'll hear more on energy policy throughout the next few weeks, I would imagine.
Have you left it too late to start announcing some of these policies then?
Well, isn't it interesting that every time we have announced a policy, Labor have used their resources of government, departmental resources, to try and debunk them? I mean, that's outrageous. We saw that with a very modest proposal to allow small businesses the opportunity that large businesses have to deduct meal expenses without the red tape complications of FBT. Now, this was a very small and modest policy that was aimed specifically at small business, but it helped the failing hospitality sector, which is an industry at the pointy end of Labor's cost of living crisis. Now, that policy, which was very modest, Labor went out and used the resources of government, used the Treasury to cost a coalition policy, and proudly said that they'd done that. That's outrageous.
But it was because you hadn't released your costings for that policy. That was the reason. That was their reason for outlining.
Why don't they go and cost their own policies? Why don't they go and deliver their own policies rather than focusing on the coalition? They have a big job to do. They have a big job to do this Tuesday night. And that job is to make sure that they deliver a budget that's not for the next 5 weeks, it's for the next 5 years. How about they concentrate on their own policies?
That policy was originally called the Meals and Entertainment Policy. You've only mentioned meals there. Does it still cover entertainment? Is that now out of the policy?
It covers meals and it doesn't cover alcohol.
Does it cover entertainment?
It's a very modest policy,
Does it cover
and it's done specifically for small businesses to put them on an even playing field with large businesses, and most importantly to support our hospitality industry, because 1 in 11 hospitality businesses has gone out of business under this government, along with 29,000 businesses right around the country, because this government has failed to tackle a cost of living crisis.
There was a press release in large bold writing saying meals and entertainment policy, though, when that was released. Does it still cover entertainment?
It's a meals policy, and you'll see all the details of that policy during the election campaign. So you will see the details of that policy during the election campaign. But this is a really important policy for small businesses, and particularly for the hospitality sector. You know, one of the jobs that I've had throughout this term of government is as the chair of the Cost of Living Committee. We've had an opportunity to travel right around the country talking about what's important to people, industries, different businesses, different demographics, different sectors, different geographies. And can I tell you that small businesses, and particularly hospitality, have been at the pointy end of Labor's cost of living crisis, whether it be rising energy prices, rising rents, pressures on wages, increased red tape. These are the businesses that are going out of business because of Labor's failed policies.
The news poll suggests female voters looking elsewhere from both the major parties. Does your work from home policy cost you with female voters, do you think?
Well, let me be very clear about this. A work from home policy is A, not a gendered policy. B, it applies to public servants only. It doesn't apply to the private sector, and anything else is simply a Labor lie. More importantly, it simply reflects the practices of the private sector. It should be nothing new. It should be no surprise. Now, flexible work will remain. Of course it will remain. But the fact is that the union has negotiated with the finance minister to allow public servants to work full-time from home as a right, as opposed to as an arrangement. Now, we will honour existing arrangements. Of course we will. Of course we will. We'll honour existing agreements. But the fact is that taxpayers who pay public servants' wages have a right to expect that the practices in the public service reflect the practices in the private sector. And we've seen some egregious abuses of this privilege. Things like somebody working from home full time that ends out there driving a caravan with their family around the country. There's one agency in the middle of Sydney CBD, a prime location, where 50% of people don't turn up at all, ever. We've had stakeholders come to us and say that they have flown to Canberra with their team to present to a department, only to turn up to a meeting room where everybody else dials in. I don't think that that meets the expectations of taxpayers. Flexible work is here to stay, but this is a public sector policy that reflects private sector practice. That's it.
To honour existing agreements, you said you'll honour existing agreements. Mm-hmm. Would that mean then just to sort of step it out a bit, would that mean that to make the changes you've outlined, you have to wait until the existing agreements expire, or would the coalition seek to undertake some legal process to crack open the existing agreement to change it?
No, we'll honour existing agreements in whatever form they take. The most important thing, though, is that any flexible work arrangements, as happens in the private sector, are worked out between the individual, their team and the department. It has to work for everybody. That's the only way that you can deliver an effective and an efficient public service.